Hello and welcome this evening to our latest lockdown live stream. And this evening it's Burns Night, so we're remembering Scotland's great poet, and he was quite an internationalist, so it's quite appropriate this evening that we're talking about the Erasmus Plus scheme, which is or was a programme of international exchange for students and more widely as well. So this evening we're going to talk with Gomes of Glasgow University, who's been involved with the Erasmus Programme, and hoping to find out a bit more and try and put it in context and maybe look at are there replacements coming up, or what can be done with the programme. So good evening, Lewis, and so I think you've come all the way from Portugal and ended up in Glasgow. So what brought you here? And
yes, hello. Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to talk about Erasmus. Erasmus has been a great part of my life for many decades now, actually. So I ended up in the UK, sorry, in Scotland in this case, through my second Erasmus experience as a language assistant. So back in the 90s, Erasmus was mainly to do with university exchanges. There were different other programs where the EU was spearheading, following very much the example of some UK initiatives like the British Council language assistantships. So to emulate that, they created a new program called Comenius, and I was one of the Portuguese language assistants, Comenius language assistants, that we were piloting the program so to see if it worked. And I was given the chance to know which country do you want to go to, England, Wales, or Scotland. And it was the very last day of my undergraduate. And it's a very funny story because we were just exchanging, notes because we didn't have mobile phones at the time. And the secretary comes in with a fax saying, who wants to go to Scotland? They've got an Erasmus grant or Comenius grant, go to Scotland. And spur of the moment, I said, I'll go. Because I was just finishing my degree and I was looking for new opportunities. So I had a job in Portugal, so I put that on hold. I was a teacher, so I took leave from that, and I thought I'm just going to go explore this Europe we're all joining in. So I ended up in Scotland teaching Portuguese in a further education college. So it wasn't anything to do with university. And it just so happened it was teaching language. But the college, in that case, it was Falkirk College. They had a very, very active international department, and they were involved with Erasmus as a further education college on the technical side, when they were actually teaching their hospitality students, and they had arranged an exchange with a hospitality college in Portugal. So they needed some linguistic support to aid that. So just to facilitate the learning of hospitality, so the practice of whatever, the cooking and all the things. So it's a very similar college in central Portugal. So I came in with the language side just to help a little bit with the language so they could develop their Portuguese. On the Portuguese side, they would have had similar arrangements with somebody from Scotland or England teaching English to help them get their English up to scratch so they could actually exchange and meet and exchange to learn how other people do other similar things to what they do, and thereby improving their practice. So that's how I ended up in Scotland, just by a sheer chance of a fax coming through the room very quickly and the opportunity presenting itself.
that's excellent. So the students were actually the Scottish students were going out to Portugal and getting some experience as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the college was in Lausanne, which is central Portugal, and they had their own links with some 5-star hotels where the Portuguese students do some of their practical elements and the traineeships and things like that. And the Scottish college, Falkirk College, got to participate in those exchanges and learn with the Portuguese teachers and meet the students and broaden their horizons. I mean, if you work in hospitality, it's one of those lines of business where you really should have an outward-looking perspective in life and understand how other people, when they're speaking to you, where they might be coming from. hospital, because you're receiving people and serving other people and providing that service to a variety of people, which are not just necessarily people in Scotland that speak English. So an outward-looking perspective is essential, and they embrace that very much. I don't know if they continue with the project. I was only there for 1 year. They might have chosen a different country the next year to keep exposing their students to different experiences and doing things. I know they were very active with France as well. They had in Germany, they had quite a lot of exchanges in different courses, different technical colleges. So it's a technical college with different courses. They had lots of different exchanges where they were participating in these things.
Sounds great. And so you're now involved with Erasmus at University of Glasgow, and I see that in 2014 Erasmus became much wider and sort of renamed as Erasmus Plus. So tell us a bit more about like all the different aspects there.
Yes, so when I did my very, very first Erasmus as it was an undergraduate, it was just language. So it was just a university exchange from university to others. You could go and do a study. So fees were waived. So people coming to Portugal didn't pay fees. The Portuguese going over to the UK didn't pay fees. Whatever we studied then was matched back home. So that's the first Erasmus I did back in mid-90s. And then, so moving forward, then when 2014, I was already at the University of Glasgow when I think that was the third or maybe the fourth incarnation of Erasmus. So every 7 years, they reassess what the program's been doing, how it's been performing, what works well, what doesn't, and they try and bring other things together because things evolve. And they renamed it Erasmus Plus, which was a good idea instead of changing the name completely. Because remember, it used to be Lingua, Comenius, Socrates, different programs doing different things were all brought together under Erasmus. So they decided to continue with the name, which now meant really training and education. So it was synonymous with that, so they continued. And they also brought into the fore in 2014 something that they were already doing the periphery of exchanges, which is exchanges with non-European countries. So worldwide exchanges that exclude European countries. So they started doing that, and we currently have quite a lot of partners at the University of Glasgow in this case, but it's not just universities, could be colleges, could be other education institutions as well. But we have, so I was involved with Palestine, a successful bid with Palestine, and involved with Israel as well. And we are, so I've participated in exchanges with China and with Brazil, but there are many from Thailand to Australia, so English-speaking countries, non-English-speaking countries in Africa, so all continents, everything is included. And as long as it's providing an added value to the people participating, which could be postgraduate, undergraduate staff, teaching staff, admin staff, non-teaching staff can participate as well to train. So for instance, lab assistants can go to a different university and see how they do their lab assistant job in managing a lab full of students in chemistry and things like that. So there's a variety of things. The subject is not really the issue. It's often the how and the learning, the added value that you get from it, that you have to demonstrate to secure the funding.
Mm-hmm. Right. And those are all Erasmus ones, are they, that you're talking about?
Erasmus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're all Erasmus. So they're called Erasmus International Credit Mobility. Mm-hmm. But they all fall under the umbrella, what they in the EU they call the envelope of Erasmus. So it's all managed by the Erasmus team.
Right. Right. Okay. And I think I read that I only saw it in one place, but about 50% of our international exchanges are Erasmus. Does that sound right to you? From the UK?
It's been very difficult to find the exact numbers because all these numbers depend on who's counting. What they want to read in the numbers. So I've heard that most UK university exchanges are not Erasmus, and I've heard that just over half are Erasmus. So I've heard both versions, but again, my experience with numbers and statistics, it very much depends on who's counting and how they're counting it.
Yeah, whether it's a whole year or a half year and things like that. Yeah.
But even if being just over half or just under half there's not much in it. The point being that when I was College of Arts and University of Glasgow mobility officer. So I was tasked with encourage students to participate in international exchanges as much as possible. So we were hoping for 20% of our students to have international exchange. So that's quite a few thousand students just at the University of Glasgow alone. And one of the greatest challenges we had was that students thought, oh, yes, I'll just go to the United States and that's an international experience. Yes, it is. The United States is not Scotland. But at the same time, you could go to South Korea, you could go to all these other places and have a really interesting and changed different perspective on the world and how people do things, because the world is not just English speaking. So language is a big issue, and often people associate Erasmus with language for language learning and things like that. Well, it is part of it, but it's not essential. It's part of a greater drive to get people to have some international mobility, people that would not normally go and see things from somebody else's perspective, have them do that. And then when they return, they would have a different outlook in understanding the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. Because this is, I mean, just by going on a holiday, if you go on a holiday to, say, Spain for one weekend is one thing. If you stay there for 3 weeks, or if you go to Australia for 4 weeks, you come back a different person. So we know that happens. So we want our students to do that and go for as long as possible, within reason. You need to come back, of course, to go and have an experience during their degree, learn their subject from a different perspective, practice their subject so they can go to non-university and do a practical experience, a traineeship part of their university degree. And when they come back, they could have done the same thing at Glasgow. And there's nothing wrong with doing it at Glasgow. Absolutely nothing wrong. It's a great place to learn languages. I mean, not that I'm biased or anything, but at the same time, when they come back with an added value that you don't get by not traveling. Mm-hmm. So it's the travel, it's the being somewhere else, living somewhere else that creates, engenders a whole range of skills that employers later on are going to value. And they tell us they value these things, even if some are not aware that they come directly from, or very much from having students having lived abroad. Often we see the skills they develop there are the ones that the employers are then asking. So
yeah, the soft skills, this sort of So there was a what was that report? There was a report on the Europa website that had about the employability skills, and the actual personality traits had actually been changed. Like, although it sometimes seemed to be slightly more outgoing students in the first place who were maybe choosing to do Erasmus, even so it really benefited them even more than they expected.
Yes. Well, we knew that we know there's a problem, and we know there's a problem. So for students of different social backgrounds to engage in Erasmus, and I'm going to mention the University of Glasgow again because that's where I work. But I know other universities are doing exactly similar things as well. So we run a program when I was mobility officer where we would fund, with the help of the Scottish government, we would fund students to go, we would pay for their travel to go for a weekend, or not for a weekend, for 2 days during the week, to have a crash visit to 2 or 3 different universities. And these would be people that would apply for it, people that normally would not, so we would target different areas, and people that would not normally, we know they would be less likely to apply. So we want to encourage a variety as wide as possible for people to go. Ideally, we should be in a position where we have too many applicants for the possibilities that we have, and regardless of background. So that should not be the issue to prevent people from going and doing a semester abroad or a traineeship or a year abroad. And those students that come back, many of them, a great number of them, in fact, the majority, followed the next year by engaging in a year abroad, a semester abroad experience. And it was that initial taking them out to another university, that initial trip, kind of field trip, that when they came back, they realized, oh my goodness, there's a world out there. Never knew everything was out there to to be experienced, because when you don't know what you don't know, you're surrounded by your life, one's problems, and it's quite a lot. And for anyone, myself included, it is quite a lot. So thinking about things beyond your front door and what you have to do every day takes a lot. But life doesn't stop. We continue, and as we progress, and particularly in students, university or non-university students, if you're thinking about the future, this is going to really open up your employability and your chances in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That report, I've printed it out here. It said this is some of the traits that they found people had: increased tolerance of ambiguity, so accepting other people's culture and attitudes, curiosity, sort of openness, confidence, trust in your own competence, serenity, awareness of own strengths and weaknesses. That's quite an interesting one. And decisiveness and vigor, so ability to make decisions.
Yes, and solve problems. Yes.
But I mean, if you can get all of those, that's great, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, year abroad.
Yeah.
So students go, they have to open a bank account, find accommodation, find a new routine, comfort zone, buying your pint of milk and your bread, getting used to the taste of the bread is different, milk tastes different. So all those things build resilience, and getting to make friends again, and negotiate all the social dilemmas of the whole thing, and have good days and bad days, being able to be coping with bad days when everything is so unfamiliar around you. That actually develops whole sort of resilience skills in learning how to cope with difficult situations, different groups of people, taking the initiative to resolve things. And there are very much transposable skills for afterwards. And you can ask any university lecturer or college teacher to comment on students before and after they do a year abroad. And there is a marked difference. Students that come from a year abroad, they always are different. Inevitably, they've grown. They go out young people, they come back young adults. It's really incredible.
Right. Okay. And the sort of building up of like soft diplomacy, and we saw, is it Terry Reinke? Did you see her tweet about being at Edinburgh University?
Yes. Yes.
But I mean, these are people that will then have positive attitudes towards our country. So that the whole exchange aspect's quite important as well. Did you get involved as well with people coming to Glasgow from the EU countries?
So we were involved, so apart from the Falkirk College, and then in the College of Arts at the University of Glasgow, organized welcome events for students of all nationalities coming from everywhere, Europe and non-Europe. So we had the largest cohort of Palestine students ever to come to the UK together, ever. We had, I think it was 12 or 13 in one go, which I can tell you is really difficult if you're coming from Palestine. Because crossing the border is just so tricky. So we had them all, and how the students then change when they go back. So only time will tell. But this idea of a personal exchange, so having the exchange go for a period of time elsewhere and developing the soft diplomacy, you'll find most diplomats working. Most actual diplomats will have had some sort of experience like that. And in fact, even I think it's the president of Iran, I think it is, that current president or just former president, who was an exchange student in Glasgow Caledonian University. Not to say that because he was an exchange student there, he became president of Iran. I'm sure the two are not directly correlated. Nonetheless, he was seen when he came into power as more moderate, having a better understanding of the West. And this divide that is construed by media, by personal experiences, and so one thing leads to another, and really the geographical distance and how media is controlled and how things are portrayed. There's no substitute to actually visiting a different country and seeing how, do you know what, actually people are just people. Most people just want to get on in life and do their thing and be happy and get on with things. So it's really good that we can help students develop their engineering skills, their chemical engineering skills, medicine, language, philosophy, all sorts of skills, whatever they're studying, at the same time as they're growing as citizens, citizens of this world.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. Oh, so with Jenny, have we got any social media comments coming in this evening?
Yeah, so we have a question in from one of our groups is expecting to do Erasmus next year. They're wondering what's going to happen. Are there plans to be abandoned, even though this might have been the reason that the student chose to do that particular course in the first place?
I can't speak for other universities, but I know the University of Glasgow has the funding for Erasmus 21-22. So we are currently, pandemic permitting, we are currently preparing our students, and we just started this year, this week, sending out the offers to students that applied to do a year abroad between September 21 and June 22, and they still have funding. So if you haven't applied, write to them quickly. And check with your university. I mean, if they have the funding, they have to use it, and it's there for it. Yeah. So the universities have to pitch every year to get the funding for these things. So if some university or college hasn't, they might not be in that position. But there's nothing wrong with asking. The worst scenario is somebody will say no. The best case scenario, you'll get a grant.
Okay, good. So there's hope maybe for another year.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hope for another year.
Yeah.
And the international credit mobility, the one that is outside Europe, we still have funds to use until June. So some of the funds would have been used last year, but because of the pandemic, many things were put on hold. We had a host of activities, of exchanges. I had 6, 7 postgraduate students coming from Tel Aviv, and they couldn't come. So we're hoping that some of them will come this year, but they have to be all before the end of July.
Mm-hmm.
But on the back of that international credit mobility with non-Europe, when I went to China and then to Brazil, but going to China, just that itself has changed my perspective and understanding of China and Chinese culture to no end. I'd never been to China before. And I didn't go as a tourist. I went there to do some teaching, some lecturing, and to talk about, develop further exchanges for our students, and not in language students, just in all sorts of different courses. And we have urban studies. We have all sorts of interesting projects going with our Chinese partner. And my understanding of China changed enormously by visiting Chinese cultural institutions, by speaking with colleagues, eating with them, and usually just walking around, getting lost. It seems to be quite easy with me, but that's just what I think. And just usually experience that, understanding that experience. And if you multiply that, I don't know, 1,000-fold. I'm working in languages, but somebody else working in business or other things, how will that affect the way they do business by understanding their Chinese partners better? Where they're coming from when they're negotiating, how to see those things, and doing things in their country or doing things in our country. There's quite a lot of things that I learned. It was just 2 weeks, and it was phenomenal what I understood. And the same goes with Brazil. I mean, I'm Portuguese, so they speak Portuguese in Brazil. So I thought, well, it's Brazil, it's Portugal. Of course, it's different, but we speak the same language. It was a whole new experience as well. I had been to Brazil many, many years ago for a conference, and it was very short. So this time I also developed, again, a different understanding and appreciation of Brazil that wasn't as acute or as developed as I had before. And you only ever get that by meeting people, talking to people. And of course, I meet many Brazilians here in Glasgow, but I hadn't met so many for so long and in official capacity in Brazil. So I'm in their home, and that gives me a different perspective to see where they're coming from when they're speaking to me, and how they're dealing with me. Because I'm not just me, I'm Portuguese, so I represent to other people everything that I represent, the same way you, Jenny, as a Scottish person, would represent something completely different to somebody in North America or to somebody in Portugal. They might call you English, for instance, because you speak English. So that kind of thing. So because I represent many things, these exchanges, participating in exchanges, has helped me understand how I operate in my environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Yeah, and I think there's another question in from social media.
Yeah, so we have a question from Facebook about this perception that Erasmus is just for wealthy families. Can you say something about how accessible it is to those
Yes.
who are not so wealthy?
Well, let me start by saying I was on school meal vouchers for the whole of my education in Portugal, all of it, including university, and I did Erasmus. So it absolutely is not just for wealthy families at all. And in fact, the Erasmus program even has, the current Erasmus program even has, so you have your normal grant, and then it has an extra for certain circumstances. Students in certain circumstances can apply for a top up, as it were. It's not guaranteed, but certain circumstances. So it does contemplate that. So the problem is not so much that it excludes people from more disadvantaged backgrounds. The problem is that people from more disadvantaged backgrounds don't feel that they could apply or they should apply or they need to apply or it's for them, that kind of attitude. So that's why the thing I mentioned earlier on in the Culture of Arts, we would try to speak to people from all backgrounds, social or otherwise, to say, you should apply. This is not just for this type of person. This is actually for everybody. If you're a student, you should apply. If you're a citizen, you should have an exchange. You should get to know your fellow citizens around the world, for limited periods of time, because you need to come back and finish your degree. But it is definitely not just for students from disadvantaged background. It's not the Erasmus per se, is getting people to apply. So one of the things that always angered me is this comment is, instead of blaming Erasmus, why don't we actually see how we could have done more to encourage other people, everybody else, to apply? Because the money was there. The money didn't say you have to have an income above X amount and a house that is worth this much. The Erasmus grant was there for everybody to use. And in fact, it's really interesting because that leads to the other common misconception, is that Erasmus is just for university students who, by definition, or almost by definition, will be white middle class and this, that, and the other, which is not true at all. Even to the fact that Erasmus isn't just for university. The Erasmus is for schools. So there's 5 different parts of Erasmus. So there's for schools, primary schools, secondary schools, for colleges, for universities. Institutions can apply to Erasmus, private institutions, companies, and even there's a section of Erasmus, excuse me, just for sporting organizations, which Turing is not going to do. I mean, Turing is a fantastic idea. It's better than nothing, absolutely. I mean, please do something. I'm really glad you're doing something, but I know I'm privileged in that circumstances because it's going to be for universities, and I'm a university. And schools have been mentioned there as well, but I haven't seen much talk about how schools are going to access that. But sporting institutions and now the new Erasmus, they're talking of adding volunteering institutions, NGOs, non-governmental institutions to the project, where so charities could apply and have volunteers that have experience in one area come over and gain experience in a similar area and share ideas. So all of that adds to the greater good of society, not just to the greater good of university students, which is good per se, but there's more to everybody's life than university, absolutely. I had a quick check online which sporting institutions had been participating, and quite a few came up in Scotland. I mean, there was somebody in what's that place called, Motherwell, but also Heart of Midlothian had a big thing where they went to train in Portugal by coincidence. Fantastic training grounds, apparently. So we went to train in Portugal and do some training course, and it's not just for youth football. The trainers, referees can receive training, can exchange ideas. So all of this enabled, encouraged, and supported by Erasmus. So you come up with ideas. Erasmus was there to see how best it could support your ideas. So that's the principle of it, and that's how I've been approaching Erasmus. The training I've received, the experiences I've had, they have improved, have changed how I teach a lot, have changed what I teach quite a lot as well. And that's just in me in languages. Other people in other areas will have been making those changes as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you also mentioned, like, if people have additional support needs or family issues, that that you have to now try and enable them to also be able to take part.
Yes.
Right.
So we'll need to see how that's going to be possible now with the children. We need to see the detail. The devil's in the detail with these things, really. But I was just checking because people were commenting on how Erasmus is too expensive and this, that, and the other, and people didn't participate enough. So that's the issue I mentioned earlier. Well, it could have been much better to encourage more people to participate rather than pull out altogether, because money is there. And I was just found there before we came online. The UK received from Erasmus projects a total funding of 679 million euros in 2019. So projects from the UK were funded to the tune of 679 million euros. That's money that the UK put in and then was able to take out, but also money that other countries put in and the UK was able to take out. So I know I mentioned at the very start, numbers are really difficult. They're not my specialty. People get out of numbers what they want to see in them, but I would be interesting to see how that changes to the 100 million pounds the UK government is putting to Turing, and how that is actually, I don't know, how does that compare?
Yeah, we need to keep track of that. Yeah, and Scottish students were actually quite participative. They were something like 20% of the overall.
Yes. So Edinburgh, Glasgow, and Warwick universities were the 3 top universities in the UK sending students on Erasmus. So 2 of those are Scottish institutions, and Glasgow is very, very active. In the international credit mobility side, so the non-European Erasmus, we were one of the top, if not the top university in partnership in exchanges 2-3 years ago, and when I had this other project. So we were just up there, really amazing projects we were running for all these for all colleagues around the world, and how they were improving not just what they were learning, but also their practice. Because one of the things, when I went to China, I went with one of our administrators. So how we manage the degrees themselves, the ins and outs of managing a degree in Glasgow is very different to China, and there's always difficult in communications. You ask for somebody to do something, they understand. So you ask for A, somebody understands B, they produce C, and how do you organize that? And this is in an academic environment. Now, in a business environment, that can be quite tricky. You ask for the surveyor to make a map. They comes up with a map that has a different thing on the map, and then you comment, no, but that's not what I want, and they come in and change something else differently. Now, by getting together and being in the same space and actually working and trying to explain clearly and more in face-to-face what all expectations are, you not only get better results, but you understand where people are coming from when they make some certain decisions. So you learn to manage your expectations in talking to people in different situations. And we do that in everyday life. So when you're speaking to a toddler, you manage your expectations when you're speaking to them. When you're speaking to your student, a first year or a final year, you have different expectations of how they're able to respond. So we do that in everyday life, but it's a whole different ballgame when you're doing that in a different culture, in a different environment where people operate. And this is the beauty of Erasmus, is allowing people to participate and get to know people that are far beyond our normal reach, and that will make for better commercial transactions, for better development, for a better life for everybody.
Yeah, and just on a hard business side point of view, it's that if we're going to be outward looking country, that we need to have that, don't we?
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And
there's that famous saying from the what was it? Was it German?
Yeah,
sorry, I'm looking for my
if you're
notes here.
buying,
So
you were saying something about if you were buying
that's
it.
right. Yeah, so the German Chancellor, Willy Brandt, if I'm selling to you, I speak your language, sorry. But if I'm buying, dann müssen Sie Deutsch sprechen. So the idea that, if you're buying from me, I will go the extra mile to make sure you buy from me. So I'll speak your language. I'll wear tartan if you're Scottish. Of course I will. I want you to buy my products. But if I'm buying from you, why should I learn your language and dance to your tune if I'm spending my money? I mean, if you're not going to make the effort, I'm going to go somewhere else where they can get a really nice product, and at least they're coming halfway through to the negotiations, understanding me as well. So there's that soft, but it's soft diplomacy, but it's also mutual respect, which we expect from other people towards us, and it's quite fair to other people to expect from us as well. So language learning also helps in this. I mean, and UK or English speakers are generally at a disadvantage because most of the world does not speak English. So most of the world speaks other languages. English is the most widely spoken language by other people, but doesn't mean that they only speak English. So other people, most of the world, have the advantage of speaking 2, 3, 4 languages. So language learning is not too far behind this idea of engaging in international experiences to improve yourself, to improve your career prospects, to improve society in general. So language learning will actually help you in that process as well. So if you're going to do that, an international experience, do learn another language.
You said you encountered was it the engineering professor or something who said?
Yes, no, it's the head. In fact, I found a tweet I sent many years ago about that. I was looking for it and I found it. He's the head of Scottish Engineering, sort of the National Association of Engineering Firms, Paul Sherin, and it was at an event for schools where he was encouraging. So the schools were getting together, trying to devise, so primary, secondary schools in Scotland devise ways of encouraging students to learn languages. And what he was saying when he was speaking to staff and pupils, so it's all about learning a language and understand the person you are communicating with is not using their first language, and then you adjust for that. So this is for any business transaction. And by language, you also understand the culture, where they're coming from, how are they going to perceive you, the way you dress, the way you act. So if you understand that and you make adjustments, then you can actually, the communication and the purpose of your interaction with other people will be more successful. You will get more from it. They will get more from it. So this idea that you just throw the baby out with the bathwater because you don't like something is totally unproductive and doesn't help in arriving at any helpful solutions for anyone.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting. Jenny, was there any more comments or anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, there's a lot more questions here. Do you think that will it be more difficult to keep spending a period abroad as a requirement for undergraduate degrees now that Erasmus is gone?
Well, we're facing greater challenges with that. Hopefully, we will be able to still continue doing that, but there is no really substitute. And it's one of the university degrees that has a requirement for a year abroad are language degrees. In other degrees, it's usually an optional requirement. So students can opt to go or they do something else, but they're encouraged to go. Well, I have to say we do have quite a number of partnerships that are not Erasmus partnerships. So we have partnerships. So we have funding for Erasmus for Brazil, but many of our undergraduates fall outside that funding. So we send people to Brazil, to Argentina, to Ecuador, to Peru, to United States, to Canada. You name the country, we'll probably have been there or have some connection with them, and not all of them have a funding attached to it. But isn't it nicer when there is funding attached to it? It is much nicer. The funding is not supposed to be, a grant to cover all costs. The idea is, well, wherever you're living, you have to have some subsistence costs. So your parents are, helping you, or somebody's helping you, the government's helping you, and the Erasmus grant or any grant that we have will help you spending that same amount of money, but elsewhere. So it's kind of a top up. And if you even go to a country that is much cheaper, if you go to Portugal, for instance, or to, I don't know, to other countries in South America or other places, then that top-up grant will take you much further. Similarly, if you go on an exchange to Sweden or to Finland, you're in for a shock. So then you might need some more sturdy funds to do that, and there are sources for that as well. But it is a challenge. So we need to, what we were doing for quite a number of years now, was part and parcel of what we did. Now we need to stop and rethink how we're going to make this happen. But the will is that we will continue to make this happen. Mm-hmm. We want our future generations to be as well equipped and as well prepared and as balanced as we can possibly help make for the future of this country and our society.
Mm-hmm. Good. Was there any more? Yeah, more questions?
I just have a question. You said that before Erasmus there was lots of different programs and they were all kind of operating independently before they became under the umbrella of Erasmus. So do you think that, if England creates its own program, then Scotland has another one and maybe Wales has another one, Northern Ireland's doing something else? Do you think it will just get overly complicated?
Well, it could. I mean, we could be reinventing the wheel again. So in the European Union, they had all the different programs. And then they decided, hold on, we're kind of going in the same direction of travel anyway. Why don't we just join forces and share things? That's what they did. So if we start doing the same thing, it might be that in a couple of governments' time, a few elections down the road, they'll come together and decide to put everything together in the same pot. But the Erasmus program runs for 7 years, so that supersedes the election cycles, which is quite healthy. So we're not dependent on the whims of elected politicians who do things in electoral periods. So it supersedes that. So that is quite good of the project. So it is not impossible. We might end up doing the same thing, but it was already working. It's already there. So it's challenging. It's challenging, not impossible.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. I think was just how easy was it to set up exchanges? I mean, in a way, it would be easier just to keep funding what's already all set up, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, right now we had it down to fine-tuned to a T. At the beginning, it was quite complex, and then we every year we kept working on it. So how can we make this more seamless, streamline the whole process? And we had it down to really straightforward. We knew exactly what we needed to do. So all this training, so you do that, and then you follow this, and then you inquire about this. So these conditions have to be met. Those conditions have to be met. Our partners, partners that participate in Erasmus, they already knew about those things as well. So when we spoke to them, we weren't having to explain everything from scratch, where we were coming from with these questions. So we wanted information. They had that information. We matched everything up. Then it was fine. So it was, I could do it in a couple of weeks of a few emails back and forth, and hopefully a trip to assess some of the conditions of the things we needed for our students were in place. Mm-hmm. So right now we don't know anything else, so we're still waiting on details from Turing.
Yeah. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll share some of the facts and figures with people on the social media links that we've found, and we'll try and just keep track of what Turing is going to bring along, and try and preserve some of what we've got, and how you've explained this evening how positive it is for the students and for society. So thank you.
The other thing,
no, you go. Yep.
The other thing with Turing, which is a big distance from Erasmus, is it's only outgoing. And incoming students enrich our international students enrich our understanding of their culture as well. to no end. And I remember at the University of Glasgow, there were a few students who, for a variety of very valid reasons, could not participate in an international exchange. They could not leave the country. They could not even, anyway, for a variety of reasons, Scottish students. And they were delighted that they could actually meet international students and have an international experience of sorts by speaking to somebody who's coming from Estonia, from Germany, and and having dinner with them and engaging with them and making, that's why people used to have pen pals, to have this international experience and see what people were doing. And so having international students here, many studies have shown how they actually contribute enormously to the economy. And this is going to be a loss to UK institutions and to society in general if we have less visitors that will appreciate what we do here, and also less visitors from whom we can learn how things are done elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the exchange aspect of it is really, really important. Yeah,
really, really important.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for talking to us. And to remember Burns Night, we've got our wee whiskey toast. So cheers, everybody. And thank you for
Flungiva, isn't it?
Well, that's the Gaelic one. I was trying to work out what the Scots one is, but a good I don't know. Something
to the haggis. There you go.
To the haggis. Okay, thank you everybody for watching, and thank you, Lewis, for really interesting discussion this evening.